Welcome to USFL Today, the off-season edition. We're still called USFL Today for now. We're your hosts. I'm Angelo Fioris. That is Luke Miller. Luke, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I thought you were going to say, as of today, we are still USFL today,
Yeah,
but check back tomorrow.
yeah, that could change. Of course, the big news is that this merger thing is still going on. The talk has kind of subsided in terms of loads of information being revealed or leaked, however you want to call it. But the big thing that is keeping the leagues in the news is USFL free agency. Luke, it's been very active since it kicked off on October 1st, and we've seen quite a few impact type of players change teams so far.
Yeah, it's interesting. For both leagues, they've kind of said, it's business as usual for now because we can't, you know, really make any major changes until this is official. But the XFL approach seems to be kind of really they're pumping the brakes. They've kind of canceled some events, pushed some events off. Not a lot of news on their front as far as rosters and transactions and things like that. USFL, though, has kind of been the opposite, right? It's been full steam ahead, and business as usual for them has looked like free agency, which we all knew was coming. Didn't know if the merger would impact that, but really up to this point, it hasn't. So there's been a lot of really kind of fascinating transactions transpire over the last few weeks. Have been able to kind of watch and observe. Some of it's guys electing to re-sign with their own team, but a lot of it's been guys jumping to a new team,
Yeah.
onto a cross divisional rival, things of that nature. So there's been a lot of action on that front for sure.
Yeah, and that's the part that's been the most interesting so far, Luke, is the not the guys that have re-signed. That those almost feel like, okay, the team's keeping its core, but it's when a guy jumps over to another organization and inserts himself into their system or what they got going on. Like one that I really like is Cam Eccles Looper going over to New Orleans. That interests me quite a bit because he brings a speed dynamic that they like over there. The other one that really intrigues me is one I kind of expected, which was Trey Williams of the Generals jumping
Yeah.
over to the Pittsburgh Maulers because now they have put some offensive pieces in place to give Troy Williams some additional weapons and try to get that offense up to par with that defense, Luke.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great signing. Trey Williams, um, I think there's a bigger story here, but seemed a little underutilized last year.
A little?
Yeah, I'm being kind.
Yeah.
But you have a dog in the fight, so you can be unkind. But um,
Being
you know,
honest.
I think him switching over to the Mauler certainly is an interesting move. I mean, they had good running backs there in Groshek and London, but they really were never able to get
They didn't
much
set the world
on
on
the
fire. They were
no,
like plowing to the line 2 yards, four
right.
yards, 3 yards, and not consistently either.
Right. I don't know. It's hard to say. Was it something schematic? Was it just because of the offensive struggles they had all year? Was it, whatever the case may be? Despite the talent that they had in the backfield, it didn't equate to success in the run game. And I think Troy Williams was their leading rusher, if I remember correctly.
He
So,
was.
yeah. So I think bringing in somebody like Williams, who has experience in multiple leagues, who showed a lot of success in the USFL 2 seasons ago really I think changes the kind of the dynamic and the culture of the offense there. So I do think there's a great signing for them. I know they added Overton as a receiver from the Stars,
That
which
was
I
the second offensive signing that I really liked for a
yeah
team that is pretty well stacked at receiver though. I feel like they have
yeah
pretty good receivers there already and adding Overton only just makes things that much better.
yeah absolutely no yeah they've got some great receivers as it is. But Overton's one of those guys I think that the Stars had some really great receivers, and between Corey Coleman and Jordan Sewell and those guys, I mean, I don't know that Overton ever really. He was always kind of third, fourth fiddle, and I don't know that he'll be able to be the guy in Pittsburgh either. But
He doesn't
it's
have to be.
yeah, it's a different system, different
Yeah.
opportunity, and gives him a chance maybe to go in there and kind of showcase what he can do in a different scheme. And he's got talent for sure. So I like the Maulers being aggressive and bringing him in. I think again we all kind of know offense was their biggest struggle last year, and so they're clearly trying to do some things to address that and improve that this by using this free agency period.
Talking about players that have re-signed with their teams, one that just broke across this morning or maybe late last night was Toby Johnson re-signing with the New Jersey Generals. And it's funny because I messaged the guy just yesterday to say, hey, how's it going? And he says, good. What about you? And but the conversation stopped there. I lost track of like time, and then I didn't keep the chat going. And my next question was going to be, hey, any word on your signing? And then sure enough, this morning, of course, the news breaks that Toby is back with the New Jersey Generals. Bad job by me as a reporter for not asking the question all in one text to get my answer, or maybe not get my answer. So who knows? But I'm glad to
Yeah,
see Toby's back with the Generals. That defense needs him.
yeah, absolutely. There was the Generals were kind of an interesting spot because they had a number of really solid players, some of their best players that were slated to become free agents or did become free agents. Toby Johnson, Hercules Mataafa, DJ Daniel. I was kind of tweeting out about some guys that I'd like the Stallions to take a look at, and a number of the guys I tweeted about were former, or I guess now current, still Generals, but
Yeah.
going into the free agency period, it looked like they maybe would test the waters, and it makes you wonder. I need to do some more digging to really get an answer to this, but I am curious. I've heard some rumors that I think maybe there were some guys that maybe thought they would get more interest, than maybe they did, and it was like, well, I'm going to test free agency, and maybe I like to go here, maybe I like to go there. Let's see what happens, and then it kind of hits, and it's just quieter than maybe they expected, and it's just kind of like, well, maybe the grass isn't greener, and end up re-signing with the team. Don't want to lose a spot.
Oh,
But
that's definitely happened.
yeah,
That has
yeah,
definitely happened. And the other thing that has happened, I know for a fact, is players um, waiting on their team to approach them this offseason, and then
yep,
that doesn't happen either.
yep,
And they don't really get a clear answer as to if they're back or not. And then sort of free agency started, right?
yeah,
And so guys that switch teams, some will say there was some mutual partings, let's put it that way, and there was some not so mutual partings.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that's interesting. So a while back when we were speaking, Luke, we were wondering what a free agency might look like in the sense that, well, players aren't really jumping for more money, right? Because there's sort of
right.
like a cap on how much they can earn. They're really looking to change systems or cultures or something like that. So I think we've seen a mix of those kinds of things factoring into where players have gone or not
Yeah,
gone.
yeah, and I think it's interesting. You can tell there's a different philosophy from different teams, right? Some teams have been really aggressive in this free agent period in terms of going out and getting guys from other teams.
Right.
Some teams have really just seemed to focus on re-signing their own guys. And then, even it's interesting, the Stallions, I mean, you would think that that's maybe a destination that some guys would be interested in going to, just because of the success they've had, and the not only the success they've had in terms of wins and losses, but the success they've had in terms of getting guys back into the league.
Yeah.
And they haven't signed anybody from a different team. And my understanding is, I think, part of their philosophy is, I think the Stallions, have had the best players in the league for 2 years. And I think it's kind of a question of, are we really going to improve by going out and getting guys from the teams that we've been beating for 2 years? And so they've added some players in the last 2 weeks, but they've exclusively been new guys to the USFL who were previously with NFL teams, got cut from a practice squad, got cut at the end of the preseason, that sort of thing. I think this was several weeks back, but added one guy that had previously been in the XFL, and so, but just interesting to see how some different teams have approached this opportunity of kind of a USFL free agency so far.
Speaking of the Stallions and the way they have approached free agency, as you just described, it makes me laugh when I think back because the way that they have gone about re-signing their own and not bringing anyone really from outside the organization or from other USFL teams, that is in stark contrast to a report that I had seen a while back accusing Zach Potter of tampering with other players who are under contract. So now here we are 3-4 months after the season's over, and there hasn't been any sort of indication that there was reality to that report or that they're even thinking of bringing anyone in that's on another team.
Yeah, it is interesting. You would think that you know, if the Stallions' agenda was poaching the best players from other teams, that 2 weeks into this free agency period, they would have at least maybe signed one person who
One.
free
Yeah.
agent.
Yeah.
But that hasn't happened yet. They seem to have their sight set on former NFL players, players from other leagues that are becoming available. So yeah, it's I'm not too sure about the veracity of that. Certainly, my sources are more inside the Stallions organization, so I don't think anybody was going to confirm that report, even if it was true. But
Right.
I certainly haven't found that to be the case. But yeah, I think you make an interesting connection there for sure.
Yeah, I think the results sort of speak for themselves. We touched upon New Orleans, who did add Cam Eccles-Looper recently within the last couple of weeks, and he adds to their wide receiver room. The question there, of course, and we'll talk about this as we get deeper into the offseason, is which of the two young QBs is going to be the guy that steps up, because obviously Bethel Thompson is gone and moved on in his life and career. So
Yep.
that's another interesting signing. I saw that Houston re-signed Kenji Bahar,
Yep.
but Mark Thompson, however, has moved on, has he not?
Well, I think I don't know if Mark knows what he's going to do at this point. Is my understanding. I think he's kind of trying to narrow down his options, but he's not in a hurry. I think he's really kind of wants to see if there's any news on the merger front. Wants to see maybe what other teams are interested in him. Wants to kind of I think he's flirted with about every fan base up to this point, maybe other than the Stallions. But yeah, he certainly I think it's from my understanding is I think Houston is still a live option for him, but he has not he's not ready to sign pen to paper.
He's to me he speaks like a guy who in his mind is sort of looking to move on. I don't
Yeah.
know necessarily why. He's had success in Houston, right? There's no question about it that he's been an explosive part of the Gamblers offense, but we'll see how that all plays out. I just get the sense that, he's, I don't know if checked out is the right word, but I feel like the odds are against him re-signing with Houston. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't know. He's been there 2 years now. Obviously, they've had two coaches in that time span. Um, you know, I think there's obviously some questions surrounding if the merger, assuming that it goes through, what happens with the Houston franchises, because there's two of them. And so, I could see him even for some non kind of team, not even necessarily things that have to do with the Gamblers per se, but just for some other reasons, maybe wanting to kind of wait and see, what his options are. And, at the end of the day, he's kind of one of those fortunate guys that, you know, I think you could make a strong case that, he was the second best player in the league last year. And so, I don't think anybody's going to say no to him if he decides he wants to sign with their team. And so he kind of has that luxury of like, there'll be a spot for him somewhere. You know what I mean? Whereas some of these other guys who may be more, you know, like a Cam Eccles-Looper, right? Like he was a great player for the Generals last year, had a lot of success for them. They chose not to re-sign him, and um, I don't think he was necessarily like, well, let me wait around for a few months or weeks and kind of test the waters. I think when there was a good opportunity, he wanted to take it, lock up a spot, and start getting ready for next season. Whereas Thompson, when you're kind of a marquee free agent, you have that sort of privilege, that luxury of, I
Waiting
can
it
kind of
out.
do this on my own terms.
Yeah. For Cam, it was interesting because although, like you said, he didn't have the luxury of, say, Mark Thompson, being an Auburn high school
Yeah.
graduate, he definitely had his sights on possibly joining the Stallions. And
Yep.
I even briefly tweeted out a hashtag Cam to Beham
Yeah.
uh, for a little while, but that kind of died out as it became clear they were not bringing in anybody from the outside. And then, of course, New Orleans approached him, and he really liked the fit, and that's where he chose to go. I don't want to use the word ended up because he still made a decision to go there.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and I'm excited for him. I think
too.
I was definitely advocating for the Stallions to take a look at him. Not that I have the authority to make or power to make those decisions,
You
but I think
don't?
he got.
Not
I
yet.
pull I pull strings behind the scenes, but I can't reveal that on here. But I thought he could be a good fit with the Stallions. I thought he could really kind of he obviously brings a lot to the table in terms of what he can do. And again, yeah, he was spent time at Auburn. He's from Auburn, so having him back in Alabama, I think would have been awesome. I think the Stallions are in a spot right now where they've got Marlon Williams back. They just signed Victor Bolden back. Deion Kane and Davion Davis are free agents, kind of waiting in the wings. And at some point, there's just not enough room. I mean, Cam
Yeah.
would have been the I mean, they've got Josh Johnson, who kind of emerged at the end of last season as a talented guy that really hasn't got a full look yet. They've got obviously the possibility of bringing back LaMichael Petway, who's now also a free agent, who was kind of a wide receiver tight end combo for them.
Yeah.
Jay Sternberger has hinted that he'll be back, assuming he doesn't get another opportunity in the NFL. Thaddeus Moss is still on the roster. I mean, so I understand why the Stallions, it's just at some point there's not room when you only got 58 people. And part of the Stallions thing is, they had so many guys get injured in 2022. I mean, people have talked about this, but they had so many guys get injured in 2022 that those guys didn't get looks at the NFL, and now they're back for 2024, like Marlon Williams, like Jamar Smith, like Bo Scarborough.
Right.
But then they've also got all these other guys that they picked up and emerged as stars in 2023 that maybe did get a shot in the NFL, but got cut or didn't land on a practice squad or whatever, that are probably going to come back in 2024. And so it's just like there's not a lot of roster spots there. But the nice thing for Cam is, the Breakers obviously have had one of the best offenses in the league for the past 2 years. Obviously, as you mentioned, there's some questions at the quarterback spot, but they've got a great receiver room. He adds to that, adds something to the special teams as well. And depending on how the hub situation works out, he might still be playing in Alabama all year next year anyway, just, depending on what happens. So, I'm glad he landed somewhere. I'm a little sad it's with our rival, but I'm happy that he at least got picked up and somebody recognized what he can bring to a team. And there's, again, that's just one story. There's dozens of stories we could talk about like that.
And there's tons more. We could keep going on and just do a free agency show, truthfully. But I want to switch gears. And
before we switch, can I throw one more out there?
Sure.
There's one more out there. This is kind of a different one. This is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it because it involved one of your teams, or your team. Joe Walker, one of the top receivers in the league last year, struggled with some drops at times, wasn't always consistent, but regardless, was one of the top receivers in the league last year. Arguably the Panthers' top receiver. Him and kind of Trey Quinn, especially at the beginning of the year, he was kind of the top guy.
I like him.
Had a lot of success with the Panthers, made it to the playoffs, came very close to making it to the championship, and yet chose to leave there to go to a New Jersey team that wasn't as successful last year, that has some questions at the quarterback spot, and how they're going to kind of approach that moving forward. As far as I know, DeAndre Johnson is still a free agent.
He is, and Eric Barrier is under contract.
Right, and Lauletta's retired, correct?
Lauletta's retired.
So, but Eric Barrier was in Michigan.
Correct. So there's a connection there.
Right.
I will tell you that I did speak with General's offensive coordinator, Steve Smith, about that. And I said, Joe Walker, nice signing. I like it. Little trying to rekindle that Barrier to Walker connection from Michigan. And his response was, "You're reading into this way too much."
Interesting.
Now, I don't know about that. There has to be something to it, at least a little bit to it. Maybe we are reading into it too much. I mean, it is the offseason and we got nothing else to talk about. But these signings. But I'm with you. I like the addition of Joe Walker. It's interesting that he chose to leave. Michigan doesn't quite have its act together at quarterback. I mean, the kid did a nice job when he came in at the end of the year to kind of, settle things down after Love sort of, flatline there production wise in the middle of the season. But who knows what?
But neither one of those guys are with the team right now. Love's a free agent now, and
Perry
went to the NFL and hasn't been re-signed. So it's hard to say who the quarterback's going to be there.
That could be another reason why a Michigan receiver who has the opportunity to leave would leave. And I do know that the Generals really like Barrier. He wasn't just like a throwaway pickup during the season. GM Billy Devaney did tell me that this was a nice, like a steal. They consider it a steal being able to get him on waivers the way that they did. So we will
Do you have
see
any?
how that works out. But I do like the Joe Walker signing for the
Yeah.
Generals.
Do you have any thoughts on DeAndre Johnson and his future?
DeAndre Johnson is one of those guys that it's like he's one of the hardest guys to try to get in touch with to even get a sense of where his head's at, right?
Yeah.
And I think that his off season has been much the same way, right? Quiet.
Sure.
You don't know what direction this is going to go. I've got no indication from the Generals brass if he's going to resign or not. The answer I always get is we're always looking to sign the best players to help the team.
Sure.
So what do I do with that? We shall see. When you think about the quarterback situations from team to team, you start to check a couple off that they're not going to become calling, not going to come calling for him or his services. Yep. So that immediately starts to narrow down where he can go. I mean, could New Orleans bring in a guy like that to compete? Sure. I don't think he would end up in Philly. He's not going to end up in Pittsburgh either. I kind of don't see that as the type of fit, but Houston, possibly.
I think a possibility.
Houston feels like the possibility as far as destinations for DeAndre Johnson. Like his explosiveness fits with their scheme, so to speak. That's how I feel like that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to think. I could be totally wrong, but you have to think after kind of the way things were handled there the past 2 years that he would maybe be looking to move on and find a different opportunity if there was a better one.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It can't feel very stable if you don't know if your coach is going to run a 2 QB system again.
Yeah.
I know that the Generals hesitate to run a 2 QB system when the 2 QBs have similar skill sets, which Barrier and Johnson kind of sort of do.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder now, with one under contract, do they look for a second QB who offers a contrast in styles to Barrier to continue with their 2 QB system, or are they going to have an open competition between two mobile type quarterbacks who can do the same kinds of things, or at least shown that they can? It's going to be interesting, but I do think that Houston is the kind of destination that would be appealing to DeAndre Johnson for his talents to fit in with.
I agree.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, let's shift gears now to merger talk, or lack of it, in the last few weeks, Luke. It's a lull, understandably so, since the September 28th PR release that said that the leagues have submitted their intent to merge with the government regulators, who I guess are combing through important parts of the agreement as we speak.
Yep. It does seem, I've kind of, as you just alluded to, sounds like there's sort of a legal aspect to where things are at right now. And, until that's sort of resolved and there's progress on that front, I think it'll continue to be pretty quiet and tight-lipped. I even heard that just, kind of based on how these things work, the more that comes out, the more it can kind of slow things down and delay the process. And so I think there's added motivation to kind of really keep everything in-house. And, this, I'm sure it's an evolving situation to an extent. So I'm sure, they don't want to start leaking information that, maybe is how things appear to be today, but might be different tomorrow. And so it sort of left us all to just kind of sit and wait and twiddle our thumbs and speculate until, people start talking again, or something, official gets out there.
Well, here's what we don't have to speculate. They've come to some agreement. You don't submit something for review if it's not in order. So what this thing's going to look like for next year has been decided in a sense. They may tweak things when they do their rollout, right? But the structure and the organization and how it's going to be laid out it's locked in a safe somewhere. And that information is only a couple of people privy to that information. But since we're speculating, I want to tie into this lull in merger talk some of the more recent news. You were saying earlier about how it's business as usual for the USFL, but for the XFL, there's been like cancellation of events and pretty quiet on the signings front, and no word about where they're going to relocate Las Vegas and all of that kind of thing. Now we get a sort of, I'm not going to say cryptic, but general tweet from our friend the ref,
Yeah.
who says that coming soon, cuts on the XFL side, I guess admin type of positions, and that can only make, if true, lead one to believe that some of the stuff that we were hearing early on, like Moose Johnston and more of a USFL model being the taking the lead here in this merger, could very well be the case.
That's, if you can kind of read the tea leaves, that seems to be how things are trending. I'm getting the impression that even maybe people that are more fans of the XFL or follow the XFL more closely are even kind of coming around to accepting that fact.
Yeah,
Because
it's hurting them though, man. You know,
yeah,
it
it
really
is.
is.
It is. But if you look at the way things are trending, you know, nothing has slowed down on the USFL side. Nothing has changed, right? Whereas on the XFL side, you have event cancellations. I saw sort of part of an email from the XFL to an agent, that basic player agent, that basically said, we're not adding any players at this time, until things with the merger is resolved. Like, thanks for reaching out. There's also, like you mentioned, no real progress or news on the, stadiums, teams, side of things for the XFL. And, you know, if it was business as usual for them, their season was supposed to kick off in February.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
have a team without a market, and there's not a season ticket been offered to anybody for
yeah,
that team.
and their
With
season would start in 4 months, but
right,
potentially.
right.
Um, so it does seem, and obviously there's also the sort of the reports that, the hubs are still very much at play for moving forward. Like you mentioned, Moose is potentially going to be kind of the head or face of the league. I think it goes back to something that you reported, that you were told weeks ago, which was, the XFL has a lot to offer, but the business model is not one of those
correct.
things. And I think
We're
the
seeing that.
not that we know a lot, but what we do know seems to indicate that that's certainly how things are trending.
Yeah, the winds are definitely blowing that way. Can I backtrack and ask you a question?
Yes.
You brought it up, which it sure looks like the hubs are back. It'll probably be more than four, but less than eight, right?
Yep.
Or however many they're going to need to fit, however many amounts of teams that there are. Why such hatred for the hubs from people? Why so much? I mean, we get the less than optimal for fans of the teams not playing at home,
Sure.
but it feels to me like there should still be a cap on like the anger towards it.
You'd like to think so.
Yeah,
But, two reasons come to mind. I think one reason that will cease to be a reason is just, for better or for worse, fans of both of these leagues, or at least a subset of fans of both of these leagues, namely that USFL and XFL, really wanted to kind of turn this into a us versus them sort of mentality, understandably, right? Like, it's inevitable that you have two very kind of comparable leagues playing around the same time, going for the same players. Fans, diehard fans in either side, are going to
yeah,
kind of turn against the other. And so I think one of the ways the XFL and the XFL fans were able to really differentiate themselves from the USFL was kind of by appealing to this, oh, well, all our teams are in market, all our teams play in their home stadiums. Your league doesn't do that, right? And so I think it just kind of became an easy target for XFL kind of hardcore fans to just sort of trash on the hubs. And after a year of doing that, it's hard to probably get that out of their system, right? So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is, and this is kind of just more generally, I think that there's people like you and I, right, who love this stuff, who eat this stuff up, who dedicate a portion of our lives to covering this stuff.
right.
But for the average sports fan, they know little to nothing about leagues like this, right? I saw a guy tweet the other day about Brandon Aubrey, and he was like, I'm not going to quote it exactly, but the tweet was essentially, "Man, where did this guy come from? Like, how did he go from never playing football to being an NFL kicker? Like, how did they even find his film and all this kind of stuff?" And I'm like, dude, the guy has been a professional football player, professional kicker for the last 2 years. Like, yeah, it's an amazing story. Like, he didn't kick in college, and like, but like, it's not like he just walked in off the street yesterday and was like, "Hey, can I try out for kicker?" Like,
Right.
they had 2 years of professional football tape of this guy, and but this guy had no clue. Like, he didn't know anything about the USFL, right? Like, he's like, I responded and was like, "Oh, well, it's called the USFL," and he was like, "Oh yeah, I just learned about it." You know, so it's like, I think sometimes we forget that for the average fan, even in Birmingham, right? Like, the league has been based out of there basically for 2 years, and there's still some people that, like, I don't think there's really many people at this point that don't know the Stallions exist, right, or something like that. But like, there's still some people that their understanding or knowledge of what the USFL is, who the Stallions are, how the league works, why it works the way it does, etc., is like next to nothing. And so all that to say, I think you take an average sports fan who already is probably kind of implicitly biased against spring football because of how many times it's come and went and how many failures there've been, even in the last 5 years, like the AAF,
Sure.
XFL 2020, even if that wasn't, their fault. Like, your average sports fan, I think, or a lot of sports fans, they just hear spring football. They think it's kind of a gimmick. They don't think there's any way it'll last or work. And then you tell them, "Oh yeah, like this team, these teams are playing in cities that don't even that they're not are not their city, and
Right.
there's hardly any fans at the game." And I think it's just sort of it's that confirmation bias of like, "Oh, this is kind of a joke. Oh well, yeah, of course it's a joke. Look at it. Like, they don't even now there's no due diligence on their part to actually try and understand, well,
Right.
why
It's
are
an eye
they doing
test, and it fails their
right?
eye test.
And so, for those of us who follow the league and understand that history of like, oh yeah, there are have been all these leagues that have come and went. There's good financial reasons why they're doing this. Yes, it's not optimal. Nobody wants it, or it's not what the
No one
long term
loves
plan.
it. No one
Right. Yeah.
loves it.
But there's actually good reasons for doing it this way, and kind of being patient and supporting it. The average person who's looking for it or expecting it to fail, I think this just kind of is just an easy way to just be like, "Oh well, again, look, there it is," right? So I think those are two reasons that come to mind in my opinion. And I think they're understandably, I think there are fans in cities um, that are just frustrated, right? That are like, "Man, I'm a Gamblers fan or whatever. Like, I love the Gamblers
Generals.
in the '80s, yeah, Generals, and I'm sick of, I can only watch them on TV when they play in Ohio, right, or they play in Tennessee or whatever." And it's like, I get that. I think the majority of true USFL fans understand the process, and even if they don't like it, are willing to kind of endure it for what could potentially be the long term benefit, right, or outcome. I think the majority of hate comes from actually outside of the league and fans of the league, and more from people either that don't know what it is or why it is the way it is, or again, fans of the XFL who just kind of had it out from the USFL, and this was an easy way to trash the league.
Yeah, yeah. Even though they fully understand the purpose of the hub and that it is one of the main things keeping the league afloat as it gains its footing. And listen, man, the fact of the matter is that the USFL has never been shy of the fact that they were going to be in hubs for at least 3 years before they broke out. So I
Yeah,
don't know why every time the conversation comes up, there's this like sense of urgency or impatience that they need to get into the hubs for this year in 2024, or else they are going to be out of business and no one's going to care and all these kinds of things. And I just don't believe that. I feel like once they get into their 8 markets or 10 markets or 12 markets, whatever it's going to be, Luke, after the merger shakes out and they are finally in each and every city, that's when you can really truly see the full blown broad based marketing kick in. Because
yeah,
right now, you can only really market on the ground in the places where the teams are aptly named, right? Memphis can
yeah,
only put it the Memphis players out there. I know the other teams send their players into those communities, but it doesn't connect with the community that they're named for. So until everyone's in their homes, wherever those homes are eventually going to be, the hardcore fan like us, like the people who are parts of the 850 some odd thousand viewers every week for XFL or USFL, we are going to be the ones that are sustaining this thing until the league can properly appeal to the masses, Luke.
yeah. And this is a little bit more of a stretch. This is just a theory. I don't know. It'd be hard for me to. I'd have to do a lot of research to confirm this. But one other thing that also comes to my mind is, I do think at the end of the day, in some ways, this might not be something that's sort of as conscious on people's mind, but maybe in their subconscious. I think the hub system has some level of association with COVID because a
Uh,
lot of leagues went to a sort of hub model during COVID to some extent. And the USFL initially, like part of the hub model when they announced it back in, 2021 and everything, 2020, 2021, around that time, it was partly financial, but it was also partly who we didn't know at the time. Like you might not have
True.
had a choice. Like that might have been the only way to run a football league or any kind of sports league if COVID had, now it kind of turned out that by the time the season kicked off in the spring of 2022, things have kind of alleviated to the point at which you maybe didn't have to do that.
Right.
But, I think when they started planning the league, I think you could legitimately make the case that, um, safe, like just from a safety standpoint, they didn't have a choice but to do it that way. But all that to say, I think people remember that time, right, of 2020 when either their favorite sports league shut down or they had to watch the NBA playoffs play in a bubble or they watched teams play with no fans in the
Paper
stadium.
cutouts of
Yeah,
faces.
yeah, exactly. Cardboard cutouts. And and that was sad, right? Like
Yeah.
people, that was hard for people. People didn't enjoy that. Obviously, the world was under, I don't need to explain it. We all lived
Right.
through it, right? So I think there's also part of that, like we got out of that and we got to the point where we were able to get fans back in seats, and nobody wants to go back to that, right? Nobody wants
Right.
to have to relive those days. And I think so, I haven't seen people make this argument, but I do think it's just a theory I have about like kind of at a more sort of instinctual subconscious level, people kind of emerged out of COVID, had the opportunity to regather with other humans again, and to have a league where that's not maybe a priority as much as financial stability or things like that, like where that's not happening, there's sort of this instinctual kind of gut level like, oh, like I don't want to be at a major sporting event when there's not a mass of people, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. Sure.
And I think people really appreciate that maybe now more than they maybe would have pre-COVID because again they
True.
involuntarily were subjected to that. So I don't know, that's another kind of speculative theory I have, but
Well, you make good points. And I guess there's a faction of fan out there that feels like unless there's a crowd at the game, it doesn't allow them to get fully invested as a viewer from home. I got to tell you, I've been watching sports for 45 years, and never once have I given a crap how many people were in the stands of the game that I've watched, nor has that ever prevented me. A game with 1,000 people in attendance can be just as entertaining as a game with 50,000 people in attendance. So I don't know how that makes any sense.
it's a head scratcher for me too. I mean, for me, the crowds, the fans, I get it from the standpoint of like, let's say you're like a Breakers fan and you travel up to Birmingham and you
Yeah.
go watch your team and there's 100 people in the stands. Like, yeah, like that kind of stinks, right? But as far as watching it from TV, which is what 99% of people are doing,
Yeah.
it's a head scratcher for me. I've never really got the hatred towards it because at the end of the day, you would think people are watching for the play on the field, not the fans in the stands. And to me, the fans in the stands, that's just sort of the icing on the cake, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, it's cool when you watch, Penn State in Happy Valley in a whiteout game and Penn State makes a great play and they pan to the crowd. There's a bajillion, college students waving white flags. Like, yeah, like that's cool. Like,
Right.
but like what ultimately gets replayed on the highlights the next morning on Sports Center is the run that Saquon Barkley had or whatever. It's not just the crowd. And so yeah, I don't know. To me, I've never understood the level of frustration. It's always felt like again, it's been rooted in something different. Again, whether it's a hostility towards these kinds of leagues, whether it's a hostility towards the USFL in particular, again, hostility towards COVID. Like to me, the crowd thing is kind of a smokescreen for some other kind of frustration because at the end of the day, like we don't watch the games for the crowds. Again, yeah, it's nice to have, and
An
you
added
certainly,
element, sure.
yeah, you'd rather have it than not. But
Sure.
ultimately, what matters is the athletes on the field, the coaching, like what's taking place in between the hash marks, and at least that's my opinion. I guess maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that people really do just love the just crowd shots, and they all they care about is seeing you know uh, Johnny up in the eighth row or whatever. But that's never why I watched.
If the league said to us straight up, hey, this is how we're going to be. We're a hub league, and that's that. Um, I could imagine support would drop off very
Sure.
quickly from many people. I would be hesitant to buy into a league that maintains itself strictly as a hub league, but
Yeah.
knowing that they have the plan to expand, knowing that in year 4, we're already into year 3. What is people's impatience with waiting for year 4 and 5 for greater things to come? Right.
Yeah.
So knowing that this is coming, you swallow it as a fan, you swallow it as a reporter, and you accept the circumstance for what it is, which is, hey, we have a spring league to cover no matter how it's constructed, and they're going to continue to build it out. So
Yeah.
there you have it, my man. I think we covered that aspect very well. I wanted to jump into tweets of the week, and then it just dawned on me that you were in Twitter prison or X prison or whatever we're calling the platform, formerly known as Twitter. You were suspended like 2 or 3 different times,
Yep.
twice, within like days. Like it was like a 10-day span where you were out of commission, but in the middle of it, there was like 2 hours where you were back.
Yeah, yeah. It was a little bit of a roller coaster, you know. It was like depression, happiness, depression, happiness. So yeah, I mean, it was for those that maybe, you know, don't follow me on Twitter or didn't catch this, my account got suspended unbeknownst to me, didn't know why. There wasn't any clear reason given. No post was, you know, it wasn't like you did this, you said this. It just suspended out of the blue. Got an email saying it was suspended, and they, you know, said you can appeal it if you want to, which I did. And, you know, then I don't know, maybe 24, 48 hours later, I got an
You're
email
back,
basically
right?
saying, yeah, basically saying, hey, we have, you know, it was an accident that you were suspended. We have these kind of automated systems that scan for, you know, spam and what, you know, fake accounts, whatever. And your account was wrongly flagged and suspended,
All
but it's
right.
been resolved. Here you go. Right. So I'm like, okay, great. You know, dodged a bullet, you know, thank the Lord. The XFL fans or Breakers fans or whoever it was that I, you know, thought was trying to take me down lost. But then, you know, a couple days later,
Can I
uh,
pause you for a second?
yeah,
Because this is new. This is new to me. Are you telling me that there was like a concerted campaign or effort to like get you flagged and taken down by one faction or another, or is this
no,
just a
that
speculation?
I think that was just speculation. That was like the theory that
Okay.
so, you know, I'm in a group chat with a bunch of other like hardcore Stallions fans on X or Twitter. And so, like, while I was suspended, they were all like, you know, scheming. One, like, got to give them a shout out because they were trying to, you know, they were tweeting like free Luke and like, you know, trying to
Yeah.
get me
Hashtag
out
free
there.
Luke. I did that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I had people from PFN and I had people from the Stallions. So I got to shout out all my followers for, you know, supporting the cause. But,
Was an
um,
outrage.
yeah, but my in that group chat, they were like, there was all these theories flying around about like it was the XFL fanboys that like tried to get me blocked, and then it was like after that, then I was like, I don't know, maybe it was the Breakers fans or the Gamblers fans that did it. Um, you know, I'm not sure I'm that important that you know they would really try and take me down, but that was a theory going around for a while. But I think it was at the end of the day, I think it was just you know, screwed up Twitter systems. But then it happened again, like within a week, right? And I'm like, I'm getting texts from people like, "Dude, is your Twitter down again?" And I'm like, "I hope not." And I, you know, I log in, same thing. And this time, what happened was like a day or two after it happened, Twitter emailed me and was like, "Your account has now been permanently like suspended forever because like you've violated the rules multiple times. Like this will not be you know, don't appeal. Basically, don't reevaluate this, like your account's going away forever
Case
and there's nothing you
closed
can do
kind of
about it."
thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, what the heck? So I was like, well, I'm not going to give up just yet. So I resubmitted because I had submitted one appeal. So then I resubmitted a new appeal. And for whatever reason, you know, again, 48 hours later or something like that, I got the same email saying, you know, it was the same problem, same situation. And you know, so who knows? It might. By the time we get done recording this, I might go pick up my phone and I might be suspended again. But my new theory is that it's just Twitter's way of trying to force people into paying for, you know, Twitter Premium and saying, "Oh, if you verify your account, this will never happen again." You know, so I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it was just. I think we all read the reports when Elon took over about the, you know, the layoffs and the limited customer service. And you know, I think there's a small number of people trying to do a lot of things there, and they're trying to use a lot of you know, AI and other kind of tech systems to
Right.
handle the
Try to
platform,
recognize
and
things, patterns.
that has its drawbacks. My wife said it was because I tweet so much that I got flagged as spam, and it was a
Coming
sign.
off
And
like some automated bot that just over
yeah, I
tweets.
need to slow down.
She might be onto something.
Yeah, maybe. So, but I'm as of now, I'm back. So
I'm glad because I know that had you been still banned or permanently banned, there was a chance we weren't going to see you come back in your capacity, man. And I was disappointed in that.
yeah, I like seriously thought about it because it's been super fun covering the league, especially over the past year, and kind of building a little bit of a following and making some connections, building community. And but it was kind of like at this point, it was just like I don't know, like
Who wants
if
to
I have
do
to
that
start
all
back from
over
square,
again?
yeah, if I have to start back from square one, I don't know, maybe it's a sign from the Lord that I need to just take a breath and go back to being a fan or something like that. But
Right.
as of now, I'm still going. So
Well, since you don't have a tweet of the week because you were off Twitter for so long, I'll throw one into the mix. And mine is in case you missed it, Generals coach Mike Riley was inducted into the Oregon Sports Hall of Fame.
yeah,
And that's a pretty big honor. I mean, he's got, a long career and history at Oregon State. I believe he's the winningest coach at the university. And I don't think it's the first Hall of Fame he's been inducted to. But I did, just to show you like the kind of guy Coach
yeah,
Riley is. And I think we all know it already, right? I shot him a text congratulating him. It wasn't anything more than that. Congrats on your induction, Coach Riley. Well deserved. And he responded. He rarely, if ever, responds to any of my texts, but he did respond to this one, thanking me. And he added, though, many people contributed to my success. And
yeah.
that's the kind of guy he is, man. So my tweet of the week is Coach Riley getting inducted to the Oregon Sports Hall of Fame, and congratulations to Coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congrats to him. Certainly very deserving, and just a testament to the quality of coaches that are in the USFL. I
Right.
know a few months back, Skip Holtz was nominated for the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. That hasn't been processed
Not
yet,
yet,
but
right? They didn't
not yet. I
select
don't
yet.
know if they've announced the next, batch of people that will be inducted or not. I need to follow up on that, but as far as I know, that hasn't happened yet. Um, but yeah, between Coach Riley, Coach Holtz, I mean, we could go through every coach on the current USFL, the just sort of the history behind them, the experience they have, and the reputation. Just really a testament to the staff that Moose Johnson has sort of built out, and as well as other people from the USFL and Fox. But the just doing a great job, I think, finding good people that obviously are successful.
Right.
But I think I really appreciate these coaches like Coach Riley that have done it at all different levels, have nothing left to prove, and what they really want to do is help guys, have a second chance. And I think that's the kind of guy Coach Riley is. I think Coach Holtz is similar, and there's again, we could go through and name pretty much all the coaches in the league, but it's just again, it's another reason I really enjoy a league like the USFL and want to support it and see it do well.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just the vibe that the league puts out about what their stated mission is, and it just adds to my willingness to buy in and support it.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what it is. I think if the league populated itself with more of the traditional hardcore football mind, hell bent on winning games kind of thing, and we love that for our NFL teams. Don't get me wrong. I feel like it might have created a different USFL dynamic that may not have been as appealing.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I get that.
I want to wrap it up, Luke, with a look at well, as the merger news was evolving and everybody out there in our sphere started contributing bits and pieces to the evolving story. A few of our comrades, if you will, for lack of a better term, really stood out in their coverage. And I was thinking about maybe we could throw out a few names between the two of us here and come up with like a top 5 USFL contributor not named Luke or Angelo, right?
Yeah,
Um, so, obviously, on top of this merger story, we can both agree that James Larson of PFN has just done an incredible job of getting information, number one. B, being on top of the free agent signings. C, recording shows in the midst of all of this. Does has the kid made this his job at this point? Because I don't think there's anyone more effective than him at this.
No, yeah, I mean, he's certainly comes to my mind as the guy when it comes to covering the league, just sheerly because of the amount of time and effort he puts into it. I feel like I put a lot of time and effort specifically into covering the Stallions, but James basically does what I do times eight.
How does he have the
And
bandwidth? I mean, I'm in awe of that.
you know, I would like to know myself. The man eats, sleeps, and breathes covering these leagues. The other day I was talking to him, and he was rewatching one of the games from last year, and so he's definitely the best in the business, in my opinion, just in terms of the work that he does, the reporting he does, as well as the sources he's acquired over the
Word.
years, as well
Yeah.
as just the nonstop grind that he puts into it. So certainly he'd be the first that comes to mind, who's very deserving of a shout out, no doubt.
Who would you add to the list aside from James? Give me another one.
I mean, I've got to also give a shout out to the ref. He's been at this kind of from the beginning, back from when the XFL first announced in 2018, I think it was, that they were going to start up. He, got into this. So he's been in this world now for 5+ years
Wow.
and has developed connections and sources. And, I think a lot of his energy now goes into obviously the podcast and, James maybe does a lot of the writing per se, but as far as pro football newsroom, but the thing about the ref is that people don't see is he's always working on stuff behind the scenes. He's always
Right.
kind of dreaming up the next big thing, kind of scheming, and he's sort of the mad scientist in the lab thinking about how can we kind of take the coverage of these leagues and the promotion of these leagues and kind of bringing people together and just kind of building the community around these leagues kind of to the next level. So yeah, gotta shout him and Zach both out. Of course, Zach puts a lot of time and effort into covering arena football as well. So
Sure
he's kind
does,
of
man.
he's got multiple plates he's trying to keep spinning, but certainly does an awesome job covering the USFL and does a really great job with his interviews that he does. He's
Yeah.
kind of the interview guy as far as the USFL podcast goes. So certainly, I mean, got to shout those guys out. There's more that come to mind, but but I don't want to take them all.
No, that's
Is
all
there other
right.
people you would mention or kind of point to?
Yeah, as you look, right, it's funny because I was kind of looking around before the show to say, okay, who are like kind of the people I gravitate to for info, or just I like their style, or whatever it is, and almost every time it's like a PFN member. Most of the cases, because PFN is so vast now, right? Ref has so many guys. Sometimes there's guys tweeting that I don't even
Yeah,
realize they're part of PFN.
yeah,
So one of the guys I want to tip a hat to, and he's been kind of quiet lately. I haven't seen him much since the season ended, but he spent a good amount of time covering the Generals in this
yep,
last season, and that's Jared Schuster. That kid did a great job of bringing a different level to the Generals coverage that was out there in terms of highlighting individual players, some statistics, important nuggets about the team and their performance, say from a week to week basis. And I just enjoyed his style and seeing him evolve as the season wore on. Once the season ended, I guess he's back to real life, and hopefully we see him again when January, February rolls around. But that's a
that's
third
right.
one for me. He didn't have anything that I didn't see him during the merger tweets that were going on out there, but that's one that I would nominate for one that I
Yeah,
enjoy his work.
yeah. He's been quiet in the offseason though, but as far as in season, his coverage of the Generals is fantastic,
Yeah.
as well as the league at large. But yeah, does a great job kind of breaking down. Here's how I remember he had a series of tweets, that I started copying him because he had a series of tweets that was like, here's how many plays the Generals were in 11 personnel this past week. Here's how many plays they were in 12 personnel.
Right.
Just really does a great job following the team closely and kind of giving that extra layer of real football analysis that maybe the average person isn't going to always be as attuned to. So yeah, he does a great job. I mean, if we're going to keep talking about PFN people, I definitely got to shout out Jake with Panther Shadow. I mean,
Yeah, another
if
one does a
nothing
good
else,
job.
for his graphics are awesome. I wish I had the graphic design skills that he has, because he puts out some really amazing Panthers. When they sign a new player or have a guy go to the NFL,
Definitely.
his graphics that he creates are second to none, and that's not a skill I have. So he does some great stuff on that front as far as the Panthers. You have any others that come to mind?
It's so difficult because of how many guys that there are out there that are, you
Yeah,
know, uh, really doing it kind of in deep. And then there's other people that aren't maybe necessarily, Luke, in the sort of podcasting sphere, that maybe from the more legitimate media that cover the league. Now he's immersed in his NFL stuff, but I thought Eric Williams was excellent all
yeah,
season long. He does some good writing on the USFL beat during the season. I had a chance to interact with him a couple times in Canton during the year, in the press box and in the press conference rooms, and stuff like that. So Eric Williams is a guy from the mainstream media that I would sort of nominate for doing a great job of covering the league, because the thing that he brought is, like, he knows how to cover a league, and he knows the kinds of
yeah,
questions to ask that maybe a lot of other people might not think of. And
yeah.
so that was a guy, like I said, I enjoyed his work. I also enjoyed watching him in action. And I think it made me a little bit better when it came to asking questions at the press conferences too. Because sometimes you
Yeah.
don't know what you can get away with asking, right? And when you hear other people asking questions, it's okay, so that door's open. Okay, good to know for next time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things it's kind of like a exciting and a scary thing to think about for guys like us. But I think with the merged league, one of the things I'm interested to see is if there is kind of more national coverage of whatever that new entity is, and if it kind of gets more on people's radar, especially if it's got the likes of both maybe ESPN and Fox behind it, or ABC and Fox, or something like that, Disney and Fox. So be interested to see if more maybe ESPN writers or more people from the Athletic, or some of those kinds of bigger sports media organizations do start to maybe cover the league and the stories of the league a little bit more closely, which obviously that
How
means
about
competition for us
how about
anyway.
they
But
start by acting that the league exists?
yeah, well,
I
that would
mean,
certainly
that
be a
would
good
be
precedent.
nice.
Yeah,
ESPN calling itself the Total Sports Network or whatever, and then you can't even get a USFL score on their scroll. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
that's not Total Sports Network. That's the Bias Sports Network.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm hoping that's one thing that changes with this merger for sure. But there were some other people that have covered the league really well. I know in Birmingham, just with it being kind of based there for the past 2 years, and with the Stallions having the success they do, there's a guy named Steve Irvin who he worked for an outlet named 1819 News, and he was doing as well as anyone covering the league, writing articles about the league, was given it the coverage it deserves. Unfortunately, he's no longer with that outlet and is kind of moved on to some different projects now. But and there was others as well that have done a great job, kind of on the local level. I know, I think it was I can't remember the gentleman's name, but there was a writer with the Canton Repository in Canton, I know, who was doing a great job, kind of just covering the USFL and covering stuff in Canton. Memphis, in particular, I think had some really great local media coverage of the team. They had that weekly coaches show with Todd Haley.
Yep.
Some of the local news stations, as well as local like media outlets there, really, I think, embraced the Showboats, and I was jealous as a somebody who cheers for
Don't
the Stallions. I was jealous of the attention that the Showboats were getting on the local media scene.
Yeah, don't
Uh,
forget they had weekly play by play on the
yeah,
radio in Memphis as well.
that
Eli
too.
Savoy was their play by
Yep.
play guy.
Yeah. So they deserve a lot of credit for, in the first year embracing the team and really doing a good job, I think, kind of spreading the word about the team. Whereas in Birmingham, certainly not non-existent, but it's not as much as you would expect, given not only that the team's been there for 2 years now, it was there in the 80s, and the league was based there, but they were also back-to-back defending champions. You think they would be getting a good bit more attention than
Find
they
a
have.
radio outlet, for crying out
Uh,
loud. Find a radio station in Birmingham that will air these games and get a guy that people know to call these games on the air,
yeah,
because that's
yeah,
how you start to really get into the heads of people, is when these games show up on the radio, when there's a pregame show and a
yeah,
postgame show and the actual game is broadcast. And you got to, how is there not a Skip Holt show live from
yeah,
one of the bars down there by the stadium every week?
yeah. It's a great
Um,
question. It's a great question.
it makes no sense. And I think that as we close the show, Luke, I think that that's an area where the league really needs to up its game.
Yeah,
If outside of expanding into a couple of other hubs, which probably feels like an inevitability if there's more teams, is they've got to get more games on the radio. They've got to find radio partners in the markets. I know that the station that our show was on in the mornings, um, pregame show for the Generals and USFL, was airing. However, the station did not have the available space to air the games. So
right.
unless the league started talking to the station early enough in the process now for next year, I question whether Generals games are going to be on the air next year in the state again. So we'll see. But that's another layer that the league needs to grow into. I think only Michigan and Memphis had radio broadcasts.
Yep.
It needs to be more than just 25% of the league.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember when the Birmingham Iron started off here in 2019, the AF, one of the first things they did was they found a radio partner and had their shows on the radio.
Yeah.
So it's doable. I think the league just needs to make it more of a priority moving forward, especially in the markets they're in, and nothing else. Like
Right.
I get it. Yeah, maybe you don't have a radio show yet, and Houston or something like that. I mean, I think you should, but I get why you might not. But there's no excuse for not having one in Birmingham or some of these other markets that they're really so intimately connected to already.
And there's no reason why our pregame show, the national one, shouldn't be on every in market in every USFL city as well.
That's
But
very true.
but
That's very
that's for
true.
another negotiation, which I'm trying to get moving forward. But you know what? Until I know what the hell the show's going to be called next year, it's
Yeah.
really hard for me to market this thing and start talking to other Fox Sports radio stations in the other cities, because it could be the NSFL
Yeah.
today, next
Yeah. We
year.
don't
And
know.
not that I
We
love
don't.
that name, but I mean, it's just we don't know, right? So until
We
that
don't.
kind of gets ironed out as well, um, I can't do anything. Hands are tied. But hopefully, a
Yeah.
couple of the other markets pick us up, and then our look around the league show might be in more cities. So we'll see.
There you go.
Anything to add, my friend?
No, I think it's. I think we'll continue to probably see a few free agency moves in the weeks ahead, and then I'm sure at some point in the next few weeks we'll have the big show when the merger news really comes out. So
Last year, the first of the big offseason news was released on November 11th, when the league announced
yeah,
Memphis as a hub and Tampa being moved to that city. So when someone was asking me, when do you think we're going to hear news again? This was before even the first leak of the merger. Like, I didn't even know
yeah,
anything about this merger happening yet. And my answer was probably around the first or second week in November, just using last year as a template. And it sure feels like we're kind of going to
yeah,
find out around that time. So we shall see, Luke, but hopefully it doesn't take us another month to get
yeah,
another show under our belts, and more stuff starts coming out a little quicker.
yeah. Absolutely.
Make sure you follow our channel at USFL Today. Make sure you follow Luke on Twitter, X, at Luke Miller PFN, and follow me at USFL Today and at NJ_Generals. That is it for this week's edition of USFL Today. Luke, thanks. See you next time.